A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. London's fog hung low like a ghost over the city, while across the Channel, Paris simmered with hunger and hate. Two cities, two hearts beating on the edge of history. A mail coach crawled up the Dover Road through mud and mist. Inside, three passengers huddled in silence until the door burst open and a rider shouted, "Message for Mr. Jarvis Lorry of Tellson's Bank." The banker took the folded paper, broke the seal, and whispered the words that would change everything. Recalled to life. He sat back, stunned. 18 years buried, and now, life again? The words echoed like a heartbeat from the grave. The next morning, he met a young woman at a London inn, fair-haired, bright-eyed Lucy Manette. Her hands trembled as she read the letter. "They say my father is alive after all this time?" Laurie nodded gently. "Yes, miss. 18 years in a cell. But if the message is true, he still breathes. We're going to bring him home. Paris. In the slum of Saint Antoine, above a small wine shop, a man sat bent over a wooden bench, shaping shoes in candlelight. His hair was white, though he was not yet old. His eyes dull with years of silence. The rhythmic scrape of his knife was the only sound in the room. He had been making shoes for so long that he no longer remembered why. When the door opened, he flinched. A woman stepped in, a soft light behind her. "Father," she whispered, "it's me, your Lucy." He blinked. "Lucy! Lucy!" He repeated the name as though tasting a forgotten word. She knelt beside him, tears falling onto his rough hands. For a long moment he only stared, then reached out and touched her face. "You are my daughter?" "Yes, I've come to take you home." And something stirred behind his eyes, a faint spark of life. He began to cry without sound. 18 years of darkness cracked open, and a man long dead began to breathe again. Dr. Manette was recalled to life. 5 years later, London breathed an uneasy calm, but France was whispering of fire. Dr. Manette lived peacefully with Lucy in Soho Square. He was gentle now, though the shadows never fully left him. Sometimes, late at night, he drifted back to the Bastille, his hands moving over invisible leather, his mind hammering at ghosts. Lucy would take his hands, whisper, "You're free, father. You're safe." And he would return to her, trembling but alive. Their home became a sanctuary. Mr. Lorry visiting with warm smiles, Miss Pross fussing like a lioness. And one evening, a new voice joined them, soft, courteous, unmistakably French. "Charles Darnay," he said, bowing, "a teacher of languages." Lucy smiled. "Welcome, Monsieur Darnay." He was handsome, gentle, but behind his calm eyes lay a secret he dared not speak. The blood of the aristocracy. The name Evrémonde. A name steeped in cruelty. A name he had renounced forever. Autumn of 1780. The Old Bailey courthouse overflowed with noise. "Charles Darnay, you stand accused of treason against His Majesty the King." "How do you plead?" "Not guilty, my lord." In the gallery, Lucy clasped her father's hand. At the defense table sat two lawyers, one neat and proper, the other rumpled and weary, his eyes half shut from drink. Sidney Carton. During testimony, a murmur swept the court. The witness pointed to Darnay, then to Carton. They looked almost identical. The resemblance shattered the prosecution's certainty. Doubt rippled through the jury. When the verdict came, not guilty, Lucy's tears fell in relief. Outside, Darnay turned to Carton. "You saved my life." Carton gave a crooked smile. "No, I just happened to look like you. That's all." But when Darnay walked away, Carton watched him go, bitterness stirring. "So this is what I might have been," he muttered. "A good man, if I hadn't thrown it all away." That night he sat alone before a dying fire, glass in hand. He whispered, "A dog's life. Worthless. Yet she looked at me as if I were human." He drank until the thought faded, but the image of Lucy's gentle eyes stayed. Months passed. Charles Darnay visited often, drawn to Lucy's kindness. They read together, walked the garden paths, shared laughter so light it seemed to heal the air. Even Dr. Manette, still fragile, found peace watching them. One evening Darnay said softly, "Dr. Manette, I love your daughter. I want to marry her. But before I ask, you should know who I am." The doctor raised a trembling hand. "Not tonight. Tell me when the time comes that it must be told. For now, let her love you for yourself." When Lucy accepted his proposal, joy filled the house until the wedding night. While the newlyweds departed for their honeymoon, Dr. Manette sat alone at his bench. Miss Pross found him hours later, his hands working leather that wasn't there, his eyes blank. Mr. Lorry watched all night beside him. At dawn the old man stirred, whispered, "Where is she?" and wept in confusion. They burned the shoemaker's bench and all its tools. The past, at last, was buried. Weeks later, Sidney Carton visited Lucy. He stood awkwardly at the door, hat in hand. "Mrs. Darnay," he said, "you know what a disappointment I am. A man who can't be saved. But there's something I wish you'd remember." She waited, eyes gentle. "There is a man who would give his life for you and for the ones you love." Lucy's voice trembled. "I believe you, Mr. Carton." He bowed his head. "That is enough." From that moment, Sidney Carton lived for a single purpose, the promise he had made. Across the channel the ground trembled beneath the people's feet. In the narrow streets of Saint Antoine, a cask of wine burst in the road, staining the mud crimson. Men and women knelt and drank from it, laughing, crying, their mouths red with thirst and rage. The smell of it filled the air, sweet and violent. Inside the wine shop, Ernest Defarge watched silently. His wife, Thérèse, sat behind the counter, knitting. But her yarn was no simple cloth. It was a record of vengeance, each name woven into her work, destined for the blade. She never forgot. She never forgave. When the Bastille fell, the sky bled fire. The mob roared freedom, and the guillotine rose like a new god. Years rolled forward. In London, Lucy and Charles built a life of peace. Their little girl's laughter filled the house. Dr. Manette smiled again. But one day a letter arrived from Paris. A servant of the Evremond family, Darnay's old house, was imprisoned. He begged for help. Darnay felt the old weight of his name pressing on him. "I must go," he said quietly. Lucy reached for him. "France is madness now. Please, I can't ignore it. A life depends on me." He left without another word. At the border, he was stopped, his passport torn. "You are an Evrémonde?" the guard sneered. "I am a man who renounced that name." "To the people, that makes no difference." They dragged him away. In Paris, the people shouted, "Death to all nobles!" And Charles Darnay was thrown into a cold stone cell, the shadow of the Bastille reborn. Paris, 1792. The city was no longer a city. It was a heartbeat of fury. The air smelled of smoke, sweat, and blood. Each sunrise came with a list of names, each sunset with the thud of the blade. In a damp cell beneath the gray sky, Charles Darnay stared at the wall. He had counted the stones, traced their cracks, whispered Lucy's name into the darkness until his voice broke. No letters came, no trial date. Only the echo of other prisoners being taken away one by one. "Lucy, forgive me," he thought. "If only I could tell you why I came." But Lucy was already on her way. When word reached London, she fainted, then rose the next morning with fire in her eyes. "I'm going to Paris," she said. Dr. Manette, hearing it, straightened his frail shoulders. "Then we both are. My name still means something there. They will listen." Mr. Lorry went ahead to secure lodgings at Tellson's Paris branch, now half bank, half refuge for terrified Englishmen. He found a city turned inside out. The streets where silk once glittered now ran with mud and fury. Children played guillotine with dolls. Women sold heads of wax in the market. And outside the bank, every wall screamed with graffiti. "Death to the aristocrats! Death to Evrémonde!" When Lucy arrived with her father, people stopped to stare. An English woman, pale and trembling, walking through the storm. But Dr. Manette held his head high. He walked straight to the prison of La Force. "I was a prisoner of the Bastille for 18 years, he told the guards. "I have suffered. You owe me hearing." They parted for him. The name of Manette still carried power. Inside, the stench of rot and iron struck him like memory. He demanded to see the tribunal. For hours he argued, begged, reminded them of his years of suffering, and somehow, miraculously, it worked. The officials whispered, hesitated, and at last said, "The prisoner Evrémonde may have his hearing tomorrow." That night, Lucy could hardly breathe. She clung to her father. "You saved him once, and you'll save him again." He smiled weakly. "I would give the rest of my life for that." The trial hall overflowed. Men waved pikes, still stained with old blood. At the bench, 3 judges sat like stone. "Charles Evrémonde," called Darnay, the head judge declared, "you stand accused of being an enemy of the people. What do you say?" "I am innocent," Darnay said calmly. "I have harmed no man. I left France long before the Revolution. I taught for my living in England." The crowd hissed. "A noble cannot change his skin," shouted a voice. Another, "Send him to the blade." Then Dr. Manette stood. "I am Alexandre Manette, once a prisoner of the Bastille," he said. I was imprisoned by the Evrémonde family, but not by this man. He is my son-in-law. He married my daughter because he despised that name. He is one of us." The room fell silent. Someone in the back shouted, "The Bastille doctor speaks for him." Another, "If he was a victim, we cannot condemn his child." The gavel struck. "Acquitted!" Lucy gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks as Darnay was led to her. For a heartbeat, life was bright again. The mob cheered not for justice but for spectacle, yet it didn't matter. Lucy threw her arms around him. "You're free. You're coming home." He kissed her hands. "For now, my love, for now." That night, the streets glowed red with lanterns and wine. Paris celebrated the mercy of its new courts. But in the wine shop of Saint Antoine, two figures did not celebrate. Ernest Defarge leaned over the counter, his face uneasy. "Dr. Manette spoke well today," he murmured. "Perhaps the people will let them live." Madame Defarge's knitting needles clicked faster. "No, there can be no mercy for the blood of Evrémonde. His uncle's sins cry louder than his words." Defarge sighed. "But he is not that man." "Then let him die for that man," she said coldly. "Let the whole breed die." Her eyes burned with memory. "You forget, Ernest. My family was destroyed by that name. My sister, my brother, my father, all gone because of the Evrémonde. You think I would spare their heir?" She rose, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders. "I will have them all. The husband, the wife, the child, every last root of that tree." Morning came gray and heavy. In the Darnays' small lodging, Lucy dressed her daughter while the doctor went out to deliver papers. The child hummed a tune, unaware of danger. For the first time in weeks, Lucy smiled. Then came the knock. Soldiers filled the doorway. Their red scarves bore the symbol of the Revolution. "The citizen Evrémonde is under arrest again," their leader barked. Lucy's knees weakened. "Why?" "He was freed yesterday." "A new accusation," the man said, "by citizens Ernest and Thérèse Defarge, and by one other witness. The evidence lies with the tribunal." "They tore Charles from her arms." Dr. Manette shouted, "This is madness. I will speak to them again." The officer only sneered. "Speak if you like, old man." The blade listens to none. Lucy fell against the wall, sobbing. Dr. Manette clenched his fists, trembling. "I saved him once," he whispered, "and I will save him again. I will go to Robespierre himself if I must." He stumbled into the street, a ghost among thousands. For days he fought through the offices of power. But the revolution had changed. The names and faces meant nothing now. No man listened long enough to hear reason. Even his fame could not save Charles Darnay from the new accusation, the evidence sealed in a paper that no one showed him. When he returned to Lucy, he looked older, broken. "I've done all I can," he said, "but the trial is set for tomorrow." She sank into his arms. "Then we will pray together tonight." The little girl crawled into her lap, whispering, "Papa will come home." Lucy tried to smile. "Yes, darling, Papa will come home." But outside, in the narrow street, footsteps stopped at their window. A shadow lingered, the figure of a man who had followed them silently since London. Sidney Carton. He entered quietly. Miss Pross gasped to see him. "Mr. Carton! Heaven save us, what are you doing here?" "Looking for a way," he said simply. "May I see them?" Inside the dim room, Lucy rose, startled. "Mr. Carton! From London?" He nodded. "I've been here some weeks. Working, watching. You must forgive me." She grasped his hand. "Forgive you? You were kind to us when no one else was. If you can help—" "I may, but not yet. There's a time coming, and when it comes, you must trust me without question. Promise me." She searched his eyes, the same eyes that once seemed lost behind drink, and saw something different now. Calm, purpose. "I promise," she said softly. Carton turned to the child and smiled faintly. "What's your name, little one?" "Sidney," she said proudly. Lucy's voice trembled. "We named him after you." He swallowed hard. "Then I must make sure he keeps that name with pride." That night he walked the alleys of Paris until he came to the Defarges' wine shop. He entered as if he belonged there, ordering a drink. Madame Defarge looked him over. "You are English?" "Yes, in trade for the Bank Tellsons. You risk much to be here." "I watch and learn," he said, smiling faintly. "Your revolution is a marvel." She narrowed her eyes. "We shall see how long you admire it." He lifted his glass. "To liberty." "To vengeance," she answered, and her needles clicked faster. Carton's gaze fell on the names woven into her work, each loop a life. He memorized them, the way a soldier memorizes a battlefield. By morning he had a plan. He sought out an old acquaintance, John Barsad, the spy who once testified against Darnay in England, now a traitor playing both sides. Carton cornered him in the street. "You're a brave man to stay in Paris," Carton said softly. "A single whisper could have you arrested as an English agent." Barsad paled. "You wouldn't—" "Oh, I would, unless you do exactly what I ask." Under threat and coin, the man agreed. Through Barsad, Carton gained what he needed, a pass to the prison and the chance to see Charles Darnay. He spent the afternoon in silence, walking the Seine. The water reflected the gray sky like dull steel. He thought of Lucy's face, of the child's small hand in hers, of his own wasted years. "Perhaps I was born for this single day," he thought, "one good thing before the end." The next dawn broke sickly pale. Crowds filled the squares chanting for executions. The tribunal convened once more. Lucy and the doctor waited in the gallery, hearts frozen. Charles stood again before the judges, and this time a letter was read. Yellowed paper written in a shaking hand. It was Dr. Manette's own letter, penned long ago in the Bastille. He had hidden it in a wall, never knowing it would be found. He wrote of the crimes of two noble brothers, the Evremond brothers, who had called him to treat a dying peasant girl and her wounded brother, then imprisoned him, so their secret would die with him. As the words filled the hall, Dr. Manette buried his face in his hands. He remembered every stroke of that pen. He had written it to free his soul, never dreaming it would destroy his daughter's happiness. The judge read the final line. I denounce the house of Evrémonde, root and branch, until its name is blotted from the earth. The crowd roared, Death to the Evrémonde! Death to the aristocrat! The gavel slammed. Sentence of death by guillotine, tomorrow at the hour of 3. Lucy screamed. The doctor collapsed, and Charles Darnay was dragged away once more. That night, silence covered Paris like snow. Lucy lay on the floor, hands clasped, whispering her husband's name. Dr. Manette sat motionless beside her, eyes blank, back in the prison of his mind. The child slept in Miss Pross's lap, unaware. Then the door opened softly. Sidney Carton stepped inside. He looked at Lucy, at the child, at the broken old man. Something within him stilled. He spoke quietly. You must prepare to leave Paris at dawn, all of you. Lucy's head lifted. Leave? But Charles, trust me as you promised. Whatever happens tomorrow, keep the carriage ready. Take your father, your child, and go. Do not look back. She stared at him, frightened, but the calm in his voice left no space for doubt. He took her hand, kissed it lightly. It's a far, far better thing that I mean to do than any I've done before. Then he turned and walked into the night. At dawn, the city stirred awake. The tumbrils creaked toward the prison gates, ready to carry the day's victims to the Place de la Révolution. In one of the stone corridors of La Force, a guard opened a cell door and announced, The English citizen has business with the condemned. Sidney Carton stepped inside. Charles Darnay looked up in disbelief. Carton! What are you doing here? Carton closed the door behind him. No time. Change clothes with me quickly. Darnay stared. What madness! I'm not asking, Charles. I'm telling you, for Lucy, for your child. He pressed a small vial to Darnay's lips. It will only make you sleep. Darnay tried to protest, but Carton's steady gaze silenced him. For her, Carton whispered, let me keep my promise. Moments later, Charles Darnay slumped unconscious in his chair. Carton caught him, eased him down, and called to Barsad outside. The prisoner is faint. Help me carry him out. They carried Darnay away, believing him to be the weary lawyer who had come to bid farewell. When the door closed again, Sidney Carton sat alone in the cell. He drew a slow breath and whispered, It ends here. The cell was silent except for the faint drip of water from the ceiling. Sidney Carton sat where Charles Darnay had fallen, the candle trembling beside him. He listened to the city outside, distant shouts, the heavy roll of the carts being readied for execution. So this is how it feels to have purpose, he thought. No fear, no drink, only peace. He took out a small scrap of paper, wrote a single line, and slipped it into his coat. Then he whispered a prayer, not for mercy, but for strength. Barsad met him at the corridor gate, uneasy. The prisoner's wife and child, do they know? Carton shook his head. They will know only when it is done. Outside the cell, a guard barked. Next! Carton stepped forward. I am ready. He passed through the iron doors into the gray light of morning. Rain had begun to fall, thin, cold, cleansing. Across the city, in a narrow street by the river, a small carriage waited with its wheels half sunk in the mud. Inside sat Lucy, pale as wax, holding her sleeping child. Dr. Manette stared blankly through the window, lips moving silently. His mind seemed lost somewhere between the Bastille and today. Mr. Lorry leaned from the driver's seat. "Everything is arranged, madam. We go the moment the papers come." Lucy nodded, whispering, "He said to wait for dawn." "We must trust him." In her hand she clutched a folded note. Sidney Carton's handwriting. "Keep the door open. Leave when you hear the bells of 3. Do not look back." She read it again and again until the words blurred with tears. The bells began to ring, 3 slow strokes. The sound drifted over the rooftops and into the prison yard where the condemned were gathered. Sidney Carton stood among them, calm, almost serene. The crowd surged, shouting, laughing, weeping. Children climbed lampposts to watch. Vendors sold bread to the waiting throng, life and death mingling in the same breath. Beside him, a young woman trembled. Her hair was cropped short, her eyes wide and blue, found his. "Are you dying for him, monsieur?" she whispered. "Yes." "For his wife?" "For her, and for the child who will bear my name." Tears welled in her eyes. "God bless you. Hold my hand. I am afraid." He took her hand gently. "You will not be alone." The tumbrils jolted forward. Through the streets they rolled, the people cheering, the drums beating. Carton looked out at the city, the cafes shuttered, the churches silent, the river glinting dully through the mist. And yet he felt no hatred, no anger, only clarity. He thought of Lucy, her soft voice, the way she had once said, "You are worth more than you think." He smiled faintly. Perhaps just this once she was right. At the Place de la Révolution, the scaffold rose black against the sky. The blade glistened, wet with morning rain. Each victim ascended, knelt, and was gone. The crowd roared approval. The drums drowned the cries. When Carton's turn came, he climbed the steps slowly, the seamstress still beside him. She whispered, "It seems like peace up there." "It is peace," he answered. He turned once toward the horizon. The clouds broke for a moment, and a beam of sunlight touched the river. He closed his eyes. "It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known." The blade flashed, and the noise of the crowd vanished into silence. Far from Paris, wheels rattled along the road toward Calais. Inside the carriage, Lucy stirred, as if waking from a dream. The bells were still echoing in her mind. Mr. Lorry urged the horses faster. "Hold on, madam. Just a few more miles and we'll be safe." Dr. Manette sat motionless, his eyes hollow, his lips murmuring the old words from long ago. "Recalled to life! Recalled to life!" Lucy pressed the sleeping child to her chest. "Papa," she whispered, "he kept his promise." The wind caught her words and carried them out the window into the night. Years passed. England was green again, peaceful again. In a quiet house outside London, children's laughter echoed through the garden. A boy chased butterflies, his golden hair glinting in the sun. "Come, Sidney," Lucy called. The child turned bright, alive, and ran to her. Charles Darnay stood beside her, silent. He often thought of the man whose face he had worn to the scaffold. Sometimes he dreamed of him, standing calm beneath a clear sky, eyes filled with peace. He would wake with tears on his cheeks and whisper, "Thank you." Dr. Manette, now old and gentle, often watched the boy play. Once he said quietly to Lucy, "I see him in the child." She nodded. "He lives in all of us, Father, in kindness, in courage, in mercy." And so the years flowed on, washing the blood of that terrible age into memory. Paris rebuilt itself, though the ghosts never left its streets. London grew brighter, safer, forgetting the darkness across the sea. But in two hearts and in one child's name, the story endured. For the world remembers the guillotine, but love remembers the man who gave his life for another, a wasted soul who found meaning in sacrifice, a world gone mad that still gave birth to grace. And in that final act of mercy, Sidney Carton proved what Dickens wished to teach us all, that even in the blackest night, a single heart can be a light strong enough to recall the living from death.